Have you ever wondered what happens when greed blinds all reason, making someone dig their own grave with velvet gloves? From the moment I received that one phone call, I knew my marriage was over. My wife had just signed the most brutal sentence American law could deliver. Listen closely to every detail of this perfect play. You will understand that the sweetest revenge requires zero effort, just letting your enemy burn in the fire they ignited themselves. Hello, everyone. Before today's story begins, we'd like to share a quick message. YouTube recently removed our monetization, cutting off our income. If you enjoy this story, we humbly ask for just $1 to help pay our staff so they can make a living and keep creating for you. Thank you for saving us. Now, let's begin the story. My name is Lillian Burns, and I am 34 years old. The rain in Seattle had a particular way of making time stand entirely still. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of Aetherist Dynamics, the world was a monotonous blur of slate gray and weeping clouds. Inside, the climate control maintained a sterile and unyielding 68 degrees. I sat alone in my glass-walled office, staring blankly at the massive dual monitors dominating my desk. Row after row of predictive data analysis cascaded down the screens, forming a relentless river of algorithms and market projections that I had been drowning in for the past 9 hours. The rhythmic, muffled clicking of my mechanical keyboard was the only proof I was still functioning. My eyes burned with exhaustion. The modern corporate environment was a pristine vacuum brilliantly designed to suck the vitality out of your bones and replace it with a quiet, humming efficiency. I rubbed my temples, trying desperately to push away the creeping headache that always arrived right around 4 in the afternoon. The sudden vibration of my phone against the polished oak desk sounded like a gunshot in the oppressive quiet. I glanced at the illuminated screen. Harper, my wife. Even just seeing her name glow on the digital display sent a familiar, exhausting tension radiating through my shoulders. Harper was a woman constructed of sharp angles and even sharper ambitions. She possessed a striking editorial beauty that commanded immediate attention the moment she walked into any room, and she wielded that beauty like a finely forged blade. For Harper, life was not a journey. It was a continuous, brutal climb up the social ladder. She was utterly obsessed with the elite, driven by an insatiable hunger for high society status luxury brands, and the kind of wealth that insulated you from the rest of the world. To her, I was simply the steady, high-earning anchor she required to fund her endless ascent. I picked up the device, dragging my finger across the green icon. "Hello?" "It is done, Lillian," Harper said. There was no greeting, no obligatory question about my stressful day. Her voice resonated through the receiver, dripping with a cold, absolute triumph. It was the tone of a conqueror proudly planting a flag on freshly vanquished territory. "What is done?" I asked, my fingers freezing over the keyboard. "I fixed the problem," she declared, her words clipped and saturated with smug satisfaction. "I hired a private crew. As we speak, they are bulldozing that dilapidated shack on the Oregon coast. The whole pathetic structure has been leveled to the dirt." The air in my office simply vanished. It was as if the ventilation system had suddenly reversed, pulling all the oxygen straight out of the room. My hand gripped the phone tighter, the plastic casing digging into my palm. "You did what?" I whispered, my voice barely registering in the quiet space. "You heard me," Harper snapped back, clearly annoyed by my lack of immediate submission. "I took the initiative because you were far too weak to do it yourself. I am profoundly sick of hearing about your sentimental attachment to that rotting wood. You have absolutely no reason to cling to that pile of garbage memories anymore. It was a humiliating eyesore, Lillian. A peasant's cabin holding us back from who we are meant to be." She paused, taking a deep breath of what I could only assume was pure arrogance. "Now that the land is completely clear, we are going to force a quick sale of the empty lot. I already spoke to an aggressive broker. We are going to use the cash to secure the down payment on that $2 million penthouse in downtown Los Angeles. We are finally moving up, Lillian. You can thank me when you get home." Silence fell. A thick, suffocating blanket of absolute silence descended upon my corner of Aetherist Dynamics. I stared at the cascading data on my screen, but the numbers blurred into meaningless gray shapes. According to the script playing in Harper's head, this was the exact moment I was supposed to shatter. I was supposed to scream, cry out in anguish, or beg for forgiveness for being so stubbornly attached to my working-class roots. I was supposed to be a helpless victim of her ruthless unilateral decision-making. Instead, a strange bubbling sensation fluttered deep in my chest. It started as a tiny, involuntary twitch at the corner of my mouth. Then a sharp exhalation of breath escaped my lips. A chuckle. "Are you crying?" Harper demanded, her voice laced with a mock sympathy that barely masked her genuine disgust. I tried to swallow it down, but the sheer monumental absurdity of what she had just confessed was too massive to contain. The tiny chuckle blossomed into a laugh, a real deep, guttural laugh. I leaned back in my ergonomic mesh chair, clutching my stomach as the laughter tore violently through my throat. "Lillian, what is wrong with you?" I could not answer her. The laughter escalated rapidly, bouncing off the cold glass walls of my office. It was a manic, breathless, unhinged sound. I threw my head back, staring at the sterile acoustic ceiling tiles roaring with laughter. It was the pure, unfiltered laugh of a woman who had just watched a bank robber confidently lock himself inside the vault and hand her the only key. "Stop it!" Harper shrieked, her triumphant veneer cracking instantly into sheer panic and fury. "Why are you laughing? I just destroyed your parents' house. Stop laughing!" But I could not stop. I laughed until my ribs ached and hot tears streamed down my face, completely drowning out the sound of her frantic screaming on the other end of the line, utterly consumed by the glorious, terrifying knowledge of exactly what she had just done. The laughter eventually subsided in the sterile vacuum of my office, leaving behind a chilling, diamond-hard clarity. To truly comprehend the monumental scale of the mistake my wife had just made, you have to understand the invisible, suffocating prison Harper had meticulously built around me over the past 2 years. When we first met, her relentless ambition felt intoxicating. I was drawn to her fierce independence. But I soon learned through 1,000 tiny cuts that her love was entirely conditional. It was a calculated transaction heavily dependent on my ability to elevate her status. My parents were proud blue-collar workers. My father had heavily calloused hands from decades of pulling crab pots out of the freezing Pacific, and my mother spent her evenings knitting thick woolen blankets to sell at the local farmer's market. To Harper, my lineage was an embarrassing genetic stain. The property they left me, a secluded, weathered house sitting on a rugged cliff overlooking the Oregon coast, was not a sanctuary of beautiful childhood memories. To her, it was a glaring, muddy footprint stomped right across her pristine white carpets. It was an eyesore, a constant, infuriating reminder that she had married beneath her desired social caste. She was an absolute master of psychological warfare. The isolation did not happen overnight. It was a slow, deliberate starvation of my support system. First, she targeted my childhood friends. "They are just holding you back, Lillian," she would whisper late at night, pouring herself another glass of $300 wine. "They do not understand our lifestyle. They resent your corporate success. You cannot expect to soar with eagles if you insist on dragging yourself through the mud with turkeys." Before long, my phone stopped ringing. Invitations ceased. Then came the systematic erasure of my family history. I once brought home a beautifully handcrafted wooden duck my father had carved for my 10th birthday. 2 weeks later, it vanished. When I frantically tore the apartment apart looking for it, Harper casually mentioned she had thrown it in the incinerator. She claimed it was infested with termites, and she was simply protecting our expensive custom furniture. I knew she was lying. The wood had been treated and sealed for 2 decades, but the exhausting, agonizing days of silent treatment that followed any confrontation were never worth the fight. She constantly subjected me to intense gaslighting, rewriting my own reality, until I doubted my own mind. "You are far too emotional about dead wood and dirt," she would say, her eyes flat and utterly devoid of empathy. "You are letting your unresolved trauma cloud your financial judgment. Every time you refuse to sell that useless swamp, You are actively choosing the past over me. You are choosing failure over our future." For a long time, I believed her. I believed I was the broken one, irrationally dragging an anchor of useless sentimentality behind our perfectly curated high-income lives. I swallowed her poison daily, apologizing for my stubbornness. That was until exactly 8 months ago. It was a dreary Tuesday morning. Because of my high-level security clearance and my senior role at Aetherius Dynamics, I possessed unrestricted access to incredibly advanced topographical and municipal zoning databases. I was running a routine predictive spatial model for a massive corporate real estate client when a glaring anomaly flagged on my secondary monitor. It was my parents' exact zip code in Oregon. Out of sheer idle curiosity, I zoomed in on the coastal sector, layering the public tax records over the geographical map. What I saw made the blood completely drain from my face. Hundreds of acres of dense forest and rocky shoreline surrounding my parents' modest plot had been quietly, systematically purchased over the last 4 years. The buyers were listed as a series of obscure, newly formed shell corporations. But I analyze data for a living. Hiding money from me is like trying to hide rain from the ocean. I spent the next 6 hours tracing the ultimate beneficiary routing numbers through convoluted public federal registers. I finally cracked the final layer and uncovered the truth. The buyer was not a luxury resort developer. The buyer was the United States government, specifically the Department of the Interior. My heart pounded against my ribs as I dug even deeper. I bypassed standard civilian access blocks, utilizing a back door in our corporate software to pull up classified environmental impact reports that were not scheduled for public release for another 3 years. The useless swamp Harper so deeply despised was actually sitting directly on top of a highly unique, fragile subterranean freshwater junction. The federal government was secretly mapping out a massive, unprecedented ecological conservation project. It was a sanctuary designed to protect over a dozen critically endangered species and secure a strategic coastal water reserve for the entire region. And right there in the dead center of this multi-billion-dollar federal blueprint sat my parents' 5 acres of land. It was the keystone. It was the hole in the donut. Without my land, their entire contiguous conservation zone fractured. My parents' crumbling house was resting on the most valuable piece of undeveloped real estate in the entire state of Oregon. I sat in my cold office that day, staring at the glowing blue topography maps, and felt a profound seismic shift within my soul. I picked up my phone and looked at a text message Harper had sent me just an hour prior. It read, "Met with the luxury broker today. He says your dump in Oregon is depreciating rapidly. Sell it now before it becomes a complete liability. Do not be stupid again, Lillian." In that singular moment, the heavy veil dropped from my eyes. The grand romantic illusion of our marriage shattered into microscopic, irreparable fragments. Harper did not care about my emotional well-being. She did not want me to let go of my grief so we could build a happier life together. She just wanted the liquid cash. She was a parasite. She was actively draining my mental resources, isolating me from anyone who could warn me, and relentlessly preparing to consume my only remaining familial asset to fund her vanity and her obsession with the Los Angeles elite. She was just waiting for me to finally sign the deed over to a broker of her choosing and hand her the check. If I had marched home that evening and filed for divorce, the laws of our state would have made it a brutal, protracted nightmare. Harper would have fought tooth and nail for exactly 50% of everything we owned. The moment her lawyers discovered the true value of the coastal property, she would have dragged me through hell. She would have forced a court-ordered sale, tearing my parents' legacy to shreds in an open courtroom just to claim her cut. I absolutely could not let that happen. She did not deserve a single penny of my family's legacy. So I made a choice. I wiped my search history clean. I permanently deleted the cache on my terminal. I went home that evening, cooked her favorite meal, kissed my wife on the cheek, and told her I was finally starting to consider her logical advice about the property. I watched her eyes light up with predatory, greedy glee. She was completely unaware that she had just looked into the eyes of a woman who was already dead to her. I decided I would not just leave her. A simple divorce was too kind for the psychological torture she had inflicted upon me. Instead, I would build a flawless, invisible labyrinth. I would construct a trap out of solid titanium, step by step, and quietly, gently guide her right into the center of it. Weekends driving a rented box truck up and down the Pacific coast, carefully packing away every single authentic memory my parents had left behind. I wrapped my mother's hand-knit blankets in acid-free paper. I secured my father's heavy iron tools and his hand-carved wooden ducks in padded shipping crates. Over the course of a month, I secretly transported my entire family legacy to a secluded, beautifully preserved cabin I had quietly leased high in the mountains of Montana. By the time the federal contractors arrived in Oregon to begin their work, the house on the cliff was nothing more than an empty wooden shell. The transformation the government orchestrated was breathtaking. Behind the rustic peeling front door, they installed reinforced steel framing climate-controlled server rooms and heavy-duty fiber optic cables running hundreds of feet deep into the earth. The living room where I used to sit by the fire was replaced with banks of high-frequency sonar equipment measuring the fragile aquifer. The kitchen became a sterile laboratory equipped with automated mass spectrometers testing chemical balances in the groundwater. There were remote telemetry sensors, satellite uplinks, and encrypted communications arrays. Millions of dollars of highly sensitive classified federal hardware pulsed quietly inside the wooden husk of my childhood home. From the main coastal highway, it still looked exactly like a dilapidated shack. But step inside and you were standing in a highly classified fortress owned and operated by the United States government. The true beauty of this entire setup hinged on one specific character flaw belonging to my wife, her absolute, unyielding arrogance. Harper considered the physical act of visiting the Oregon coast to be completely beneath her dignity. The air was too salty, the roads were too muddy, and there were no luxury boutiques within a 50-mile radius. In the entire 2 years we had been married, she had refused to step foot on the property. Her elitist disdain was my ultimate shield. Because she never bothered to check on the filthy place, she remained completely oblivious to the fact that the interior had been gutted, rebuilt, and legally transferred to a federal agency nearly 6 months ago. She never checked the updated county tax records because she assumed she already knew everything there was to know about my pathetic inheritance. The final piece of the puzzle snapped into place last week. I was scheduled to attend a mandatory corporate retreat in Chicago for 5 days. It was the perfect window of opportunity for Harper to enact her own ruthless strategy. Sitting in our high-rise apartment, she logged onto her laptop and downloaded a secure browser to access the dark web. She sought out a shadow crew. These were not licensed, bonded contractors who pulled municipal permits. These were unregulated, off-the-books scavengers who specialized in cheap, rapid, and often illegal demolition. They did not ask for proof of ownership. They did not check state zoning laws. They only asked for large sums of cash. Her twisted logic was horrifyingly simple. She believed that if she flattened the house while I was thousands of miles away, I would be forced to accept it as an irreversible reality. She wanted to create a situation where the physical structure was gone forever, leaving me with no choice but to sell the empty dirt to her aggressive real estate broker. She paid the shadow crew in untraceable cryptocurrency, providing them with explicit written instructions to bulldoze the structure in the dead of night, scoop the debris into massive dump trucks, and leave nothing but flat earth behind. She thought she was a financial mastermind, brilliantly orchestrating a decisive victory for our shared portfolio by eliminating my emotional dead weight. She had absolutely no idea what she had truly set into motion. She believed she was tearing down a worthless pile of rotting wood. In reality, she had just contracted a team of criminals to orchestrate a highly illegal, catastrophic physical assault on millions of dollars of federal property. She had blindly aimed a sledgehammer at a titanium trap built by the Department of the Interior, and now she was about to feel the trap snap shut. I stepped out of the private elevator and into the expansive foyer of our downtown Seattle apartment at precisely 8 o'clock in the evening. The air inside the penthouse was thick with the rich, intoxicating aroma of roasted duck black truffles and expensive melted butter. Soft ambient jazz floated smoothly through the integrated ceiling speakers. The long dining table was meticulously set with our finest bone china, heavy silver cutlery, and 3 tall flickering beeswax candles. Harper stood gracefully by the marble kitchen island. She was wearing a stunning emerald green designer silk dress that clung tightly to her sharp figure, her hair impeccably styled into a sleek blowout. In her hand, she swirled a glass of dark red wine. The bottle sitting open on the counter was a vintage Bordeaux that easily cost $2,000. It was a specific bottle we had explicitly agreed to save in the cellar for our 10th wedding anniversary. "Welcome home, darling," Harper purred, taking a slow, highly dramatic sip from her crystal glass. Her eyes were alight with a terrifying manic energy. It was the absolute, unadulterated thrill of a predator who firmly believed she had just secured the final bloody kill. "Sit down. I ordered a spectacular spread from that private French chef you love. We have a monumental evening ahead of us." I placed my heavy leather briefcase carefully beside the mahogany dining chair and sat down. My exterior was a mask of cold, unreadable stone. Deep inside my wool coat pocket, my right thumb located the textured side button of my smartphone. I pressed it twice, feeling the brief haptic vibration against my thigh. That tiny buzz confirmed the encrypted voice recorder application was actively running securely, capturing every single sound in the room. "You went to a lot of trouble," I said, keeping my voice entirely flat and entirely devoid of emotion. Harper laughed, a sharp tinkling sound that grated violently against my eardrums. She glided over to the table, carrying a heavy silver platter of food. "I am simply being the bold, decisive wife you desperately need me to be, Lillian. Someone had to finally take charge of our financial future. You were completely paralyzed by your own pathetic sentimentality. I am the visionary in this marriage." She poured me a generous glass of the expensive Bordeaux and sat directly across from me, her dark eyes gleaming viciously in the candlelight. "I know you were shocked on the phone earlier today, but I promise you in a few short weeks, when that useless muddy dirt is sold and we secure the massive down payment for the Los Angeles penthouse, you will thank me. I am freeing you from your own miserable lower-class past." I did not touch the wine. I folded my hands tightly together on the pristine white tablecloth. "Walk me through exactly what you did, Harper. I need to understand the logistics." My tone was carefully calibrated to sound utterly defeated, perfectly mimicking a woman who had finally surrendered to her dominating, abusive partner. Harper eagerly swallowed the bait. She leaned forward, her face flushed with the intoxicating, arrogant rush of total control. "It was incredibly easy, honestly," she bragged, taking another deep sip of wine. "While you were sitting in your boring corporate meetings in Chicago, I took matters completely into my own hands. You stubbornly refused to sign a legal demolition permit, and the county office is full of slow, irritating bureaucratic red tape. So I bypassed them completely. I installed a secure browser. I accessed a specialized encrypted network online. I found a highly recommended private crew who specifically advertised rapid off-the-books site clearance. Off the books. I repeated slowly, ensuring the microphone hidden in my pocket captured the exact phrase with perfect clarity. Meaning, they are not legally licensed or bonded by the state. "Obviously," Harper scoffed, rolling her eyes dramatically as if I were a particularly slow child. "Licensed contractors ask far too many questions. They require municipal approvals and environmental inspections. I needed people who would just drive out to the coast, tear that rotting wooden structure down to the foundation, and haul the garbage away without breathing a single word to the local authorities." "And exactly how did you compensate a covert crew like that?" I asked softly, my eyes locked onto hers. "Cash, of course," she replied, her voice brimming with smug, absolute self-satisfaction. "I withdrew exactly $45,000 from our joint high-yield savings account 2 days ago. I met their lead foreman in a dark parking lot on the industrial edge of the city. I handed him a heavy duffel bag full of crisp $100 bills. There is absolutely no paper trail. There are no credit card receipts. It is completely untraceable." She was doing the heavy lifting for me. She was gleefully weaving her own rope, tying the knot tighter with remarkable speed and overwhelming enthusiasm. $45,000 of our shared money, I stated, clearly projecting my voice slightly. You gave a massive bag of cash to unidentified, unregulated criminals. Did you at least ensure they targeted the correct location? I am not an idiot, Lillian. Harper snapped, her tone dripping with intense condescension. I gave the foreman a highly detailed satellite map. I physically drew a bright red circle around your parents' exact property line. I provided the precise longitudinal and latitudinal coordinates. I gave them explicit written instructions that the entire wooden structure was to be completely leveled to the dirt. I told them I wanted the ground scraped utterly bare. I made it absolutely clear that if a single piece of wood or pipe was left standing by sunrise today, they would not receive the second half of their payment. So, just to be absolutely clear for my own peace of mind, I said, leaning in slightly across the table. You, acting completely alone, intentionally hired an unlicensed demolition crew. You paid them in untraceable cash using our joint funds, and you gave them direct written orders to destroy the property on the Oregon coast, without securing a single legal permit or informing the registered owner. Is that 100% correct? Harper slammed her manicured hand down hard on the table, causing the heavy silverware to rattle violently against the fine china. Yes, that is exactly what I did, and I am incredibly proud of it. I am the only one in this relationship with the actual courage to make hard, necessary financial decisions. I ripped the bandage off. The ugly house is gone. The problem is permanently solved. Now eat your expensive dinner and stop interrogating me like a hostile witness in a courtroom. The silence that followed her outburst was heavy, thick, and absolute. The jazz music had seamlessly faded into a quiet interlude, leaving only the soft, crackling hiss of the beeswax candles. I looked at Harper. I looked at her perfectly painted lips, her thousands of dollars worth of clothing, and the arrogant, furious, entitled fire burning brightly in her eyes. Slowly, and with deliberate, agonizing precision, I reached out and pushed my full crystal glass of vintage Bordeaux to the far edge of the table. I bent down and unlatched the heavy brass locks of my leather briefcase. I reached inside and pulled out a thick, substantial manila folder. I placed it squarely in the dead center of the dining table, right between the roasted duck and the flickering candles. The front of the folder bore a massive, highly intimidating seal stamped in bright, unforgiving red ink. It was the official, unmistakable insignia of the United States Department of the Interior. Harper stared blankly at the folder, her perfectly sculpted brow furrowed in genuine creeping confusion. "What is that?" she asked, the sharp, victorious edge of her confidence faltering for the very first time all evening. "You did not just demolish my parents' house, Harper," I said. My voice was no longer a flat, defeated monotone. It was a hardened blade of solid ice slicing effortlessly through the warm, luxurious, arrogant air of the penthouse. I watched her dark eyes widen in sheer terror as I delivered the final, devastating truth. You just ordered the catastrophic destruction of a highly classified, multi-million-dollar biological research facility belonging to the government of the United States of America. The blood completely drained from Harper's face, leaving behind a sickly, chalky white pallor. The arrogant fire in her eyes extinguished in an instant, replaced by the raw, primal panic of a cornered animal. Her hands trembled violently as she snatched the manila folder from the table. She tore it open, her eyes darting frantically across the heavily redacted federal documents, the classified architectural schematics, and the official transfer deeds. She dropped the papers as if they were burning coal. "No," she gasped, her voice barely a whisper. "This is a bluff. You forged these. You are lying to me." She bolted from the dining room, her expensive silk dress catching sharply on the edge of the chair. She threw herself onto the plush living room sofa and ripped open her silver laptop. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, frantically navigating to the public county tax assessor's portal. She punched in the coastal parcel number. I watched her screen illuminate the dark room. There, under the bold heading of current ownership registered exactly 6 months and 14 days ago, was the undeniable truth: the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. Harper stared at the glowing pixels. A low, wretched sound escaped her throat. It was not a scream. It was the sound of a woman realizing she had just stepped off a cliff in the dark. She spent the rest of the night pacing the hardwood floors, throwing back glasses of the $2,000 wine in absolute silence, while I calmly went to sleep in the guest bedroom. The consequences arrived exactly at 6 o'clock the next morning. The heavy rhythmic pounding on our reinforced penthouse door shattered the early morning stillness. Before Harper could even stumble out of the master suite, I unlocked the deadbolt. A wave of dark tactical gear, glaring flashlights, and gold badges flooded into our foyer. 4 heavily armed agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, accompanied by 2 senior investigators from the Environmental Protection Agency, stood in my living room. Their expressions were carved from granite. Harper froze in the hallway, clutching her silk robe tightly against her chest, her eyes wide with sheer terror as the lead agent stepped forward. He did not offer a polite greeting. "Harper Burns," the agent barked, his voice echoing loudly against the high ceilings. "You are being detained under suspicion of domestic terrorism, attempted destruction of highly classified federal property, and severe violations of the Federal Endangered Species Act." Harper collapsed against the wall, her legs giving out completely. "There is a mistake. I just hired some guys to clear a lot. It was a rotting shack. It was my wife's property." The agent pulled a rugged tablet from his tactical vest. "Your hired crew never even swung their sledgehammers." The moment their heavy machinery breached the perimeter line, they tripped an encrypted federal seismic alarm. Armed forest rangers and federal marshals surrounded them within 12 minutes. They were caught red-handed with a bulldozer aimed directly at a government research station. He swiped the screen, holding it up for her to see. "They flipped on you before they even reached the precinct. The foreman traded you for a plea deal immediately. We have the exact coordinates you drew. We have the encrypted text messages giving the green light for an illegal demolition, and we have the heavy duffel bag containing $45,000 in cash bearing your fingerprints on the straps." Harper's head snapped toward me. Her terror instantly morphed into a rabid, desperate fury. She pointed a trembling finger at my face. "She set me up. She is the one who wanted it gone. She planned this entire thing to ruin me. Arrest her. She trapped me." Right on cue, the polished mahogany doors of our private elevator slid open. My attorney, a towering man specializing in high-stakes federal defense, stepped calmly into the penthouse. He handed a sleek silver flash drive directly to the lead investigator. "Good morning, gentlemen," my lawyer stated, straightening his tailored suit jacket. "My client has been in Chicago on documented corporate business for the past 5 days, fully verified by flight manifests and hotel security footage. She had absolutely zero knowledge of her wife's illicit activities. Furthermore, on that drive, you will find a pristine high-definition audio recording captured just last night at this very dining table. In it, you will clearly hear Harper explicitly confessing to acting entirely alone, bypassing municipal laws, and intentionally hiring an unpermitted crew with joint funds without my client's consent or prior knowledge." The lead agent slipped the drive into his pocket and nodded curtly. My attorney then turned his cold, professional gaze down to Harper, who was now weeping hysterically on the floor. "I am legally obligated to inform you that as of 8 o'clock this morning, a federal judge has signed a sweeping injunction. Every single personal bank account, investment portfolio, and luxury asset in your name has been completely frozen. The government will liquidate everything you own to cover the extensive legal damages and the deployment costs of the tactical teams." Harper looked up, her mascara running in thick black rivers down her cheeks. The flawless, arrogant socialite was gone, leaving behind nothing but a shattered, destitute criminal. "You are currently facing 4 separate federal felony charges," my attorney continued mercilessly, his voice echoing like a judge reading a death warrant. "Given the sheer severity of the ecological statutes you attempted to violate, the mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines dictate that you are looking at a minimum of 10 years in a federal penitentiary. You have absolutely nothing left." 2 agents stepped forward, grabbing Harper by her arms and hauling her roughly to her feet. The harsh metallic ratcheting sound of heavy steel handcuffs locking tightly around her wrists echoed loudly through the lavish penthouse. It was the final definitive sound of a velvet-gloved hand being crushed beneath the unyielding weight of the United States justice system. Exactly 1 year has passed since that chaotic morning in Seattle. The legal dissolution of my marriage was finalized with breathtaking speed. Because Harper committed multiple federal felonies and all of her personal assets were immediately seized by the government to pay for restitution. She had absolutely no financial leverage. She could not touch the $12 million safely secured in my blind trust. Today, Harper is quietly serving her sentence at a federal correctional institution in Southern California. The wealthy high society friends she worshipped so desperately abandoned her the exact moment the metal handcuffs clicked shut. She was instantly erased from the elite circles she sacrificed her entire life to join. As for me, there is no lingering anger in my heart. I do not feel the need to gloat or celebrate her downfall. Instead, when I wake up every morning, I simply feel a profound, overwhelming sense of peace. I am finally breathing clean air. I did not use the $12 million to buy a flashy penthouse or luxury cars. Instead, I took a large portion of that wealth and established a permanent academic foundation. The Burns Family Ecology Trust now fully funds the education and field research of bright young scientists who are dedicating their lives to protecting the coastal ecosystem. Right now, I am standing on the rugged edge of the Oregon cliffs. The afternoon sun is breaking through the heavy clouds, casting a golden glow over the churning Pacific Ocean. Behind me sits the fully operational Federal Research Station. The government architects kept their promise beautifully. The exterior is a stunning, respectful homage to the rustic wooden house I grew up in, blending seamlessly and proudly into the towering pine trees. Inside it hums with the vital work of preserving the earth. I close my eyes and take a long, deep breath of the sharp, salty sea breeze. Listening to the crash of the waves against the ancient rocks below, the absolute truth finally settles into my bones. The real legacy my parents left me was never just a collection of old wooden walls or a plot of dirt. It was the fierce resilience they built into my character. It was their unconditional love that taught me my own inherent worth and the quiet, unyielding strength to protect myself when someone tried to tear me down. I open my eyes smiling at the horizon. I am finally completely free. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. We hope you enjoyed it. As an ad-free channel, your support is what keeps us alive. Please support James Revenge Stories with just $1 via the QR code on the screen or click the link in the description box or pinned comment. Also, we would love to connect with you. Please leave a comment telling us which city or state you are listening from. Thank you for standing with us, and see you in the next stories.